friends. Welcome to the Creative Impact Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Caldwell, and I'm so happy you're here. Each episode, I take some time to chat with fellow artists about life, faith, and the impact of the arts. Welcome to episode 88. This week, we have a special conversation as 2 years ago this week, I lost my sister. So grateful to have GriefShare facilitators Richard Rogers and Donnel Schmidt join me to share their experience with loss and grief. We remember their daughter, Tracie Lynn Hester, and the profound impact her life and death have had on countless lives. We chat about the power of community and grief, healthy versus unhealthy ways to process our grief, and finding ways to honor the life of a loved one that we've lost. If you are walking through loss, you can find community and resources for the journey at griefshare.org. If this is your first time joining us, thank you so much for listening in, and we're so grateful to have you. I know we all deal with different losses in life, some that feel bigger or smaller, but I think they all have a profound impact on us, and I hope that wherever you are in your life, that this conversation will be a source of encouragement and hope for you. Enjoy my conversation with Donnel Schmidt and Richard Rogers. Well, this is a really, I would say, very special conversation that I'm getting to have today with Richard Rogers and Donnel Schmidt here with me today. Thank you both for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for hosting. Yeah.
Yes. So just to kind of give everyone the backdrop here, I started thinking about, so tomorrow, as we're recording this, which will be the 16th of January, is the 2-year anniversary of my sister's passing. And so kind of thinking about loss and about grief and kind of that whole grief process. And the two of you came to mind because you guys were the leaders of a GriefShare group that my parents went to whenever my sister first passed away. So they got to go through that process with you guys. And we also, this is a cool, I think, just like a God story of how we got connected originally, is through your daughter, Tracie Lynn Hester. And she was part of dance team with me on the Austin Angels back in high school. I believe I was a sophomore when she was a senior. So definitely got to have fun and look up to her and just, seeing her beauty and joy. And unfortunately, we lost her that year after she graduated. And I just remember, the memorial service and all the things that you guys did to honor her legacy as well. And I know we'll get more into the story, but just some cool connections there. There was a scholarship in her name. I think, is that still going today?
No.
Okay, but
we did it about the first 12 years.
We did it for about 10. Yeah, for about 10 or 12 years.
Yeah.
When Betsy retired, I think some of that lost a little bit of momentum then, but it was time to focus on the future at that point too.
Right.
So, yeah.
I just felt like that was such a beautiful way to honor her. And I believe I was the first recipient of the Butterflies Are Free Award. So that was really a special thing for me. So thank you for just continuing her legacy. And we'll definitely talk more about that. But I guess first, do you guys want to just introduce yourselves, kind of name and what you do now? And then we can jump into your story and more about just processing through loss. So do you want to start us off, Donnel?
Yeah. So my name is Donnel Schmidt, and I am Tracie's mother. I brought her into this world on May 18th of the year 1988.
Yeah.
And that's basically my part of Tracie. I can go in more in depth if you want, or just introduce Richard.
Yeah, we could introduce Richard, and then we'll maybe jump back into the story. That would be great.
Sure. Well, my name is Richard Rogers. I'm Tracie's stepdad. And so I sort of came into her life when Donnel and I met in late 2001, early 2002. Then when we got married in 2003, and enjoyed every second of being her stepdad. She was a remarkable child going into young adulthood. So that's it. I've been retired from active work since 2016. And now I spent a good bit of my time volunteering, some of that, the inspiration of which comes from my association with Tracie.
Yeah, which is so, so neat. So do you, Donnell, just want to share more of the story behind the loss that you experienced? And then maybe we can get into GriefShare after that.
Okay, yeah. Tracie was the second of four kids that I had, and she was so full of life and joy and happiness. She wanted to continue being anything to do with Stephen F. Austin. And
Mm-hmm.
Richard actually went to college there. And so her goal was to get into Stephen F. and go to college. Well, she gets in and goes, loves the college life. We go up parents' weekend. She was so excited and happy. And obviously, college life was fitting in well. And she'd already made friends. And she was just the happiest time. She had a boyfriend from high school that they were doing great, and everything was just falling into place. We'd go
Mm-hmm.
there on that weekend, and a lot of the kids are, doing their own things when their parents are there. And Tracie actually came to our room and jumped in bed, and her and I
Aw.
actually raided a vending machine that night. And it was just one of those moments you have as a parent with your 18-year-old of, wow, this is so fun.
Yeah, that's
And
so
the very next
special.
day, yeah, the very next day we leave and she's on her balcony and she looks down at us and she does her blowing kiss and her dance angel pose where she kicks her leg up and waves bye. And it was just
Aw.
wonderful moment. And I think we saw this beautiful rainbow leaving. And I
Mm.
remember kind of getting upset, kind of crying, going, I miss her. And Richard and I were kind of talking about, she'll be home again soon and we'll see her. But we were just so joyful because she was so joyful and it was just the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the very next weekend, she's going to be coming home for my dad's birthday. And we knew that was happening. And so on Friday, October 6th, she was going to be home that day and we were going to celebrate with the weekend. Well, I was working and I get a phone call from Tracie's phone. This was about 10:30 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And the lady that answered, and first thing she asked was, "Are you Tracie's mom?" And of course, the first thing in my mind was, this is college. Something went wrong. Maybe they didn't get a payment, right? So I'm thinking,
Mm.
yes. And she said, well, I'm here with your daughter, and she has been in a car accident.
Mm.
And I'm very patient, very calm. And I said, oh, wow. Well, can I talk to her? Me thinking she's going to get on the phone, probably handed the phone to this lady and said, you better call my mom. This is a new
Right.
car. And
Uh-huh.
the lady in the background was, you could tell she was talking to other people. And she gets back on the phone and said, well, they are trying to get her out of her vehicle.
Mm.
The car's upside down and they're working on getting her out. And at that point, I asked, well, is she okay? And the lady put the phone down on her chin and asked something to the paramedics, and the paramedics said she needs to get here.
Oh, wow.
So I'm kind of numb, but I'm thinking, okay, no problem. I'll get there and let me figure this out. At the time, Richard was out of town. My neighbors were out of town. My daughter wasn't here. And
Mm-hmm.
so, what do I do? Where do I go? And so I'm thinking, I'm going to get my car and I'm going to drive. And this was about 20 minutes from college, right,
Okay.
Richard? It wasn't that far from leaving college, correct?
Tracie was about, less than half an hour away from Stephen F. She was in between Corrigan and Eyeball up on 59.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought, well, I'm gonna get in the car and just drive over. And then I thought I really want someone with me to, maybe take pictures of the car, talk to the police, you know, bring her
Yeah.
home. I have to think all that through. And
All the
so as I'm
administrative stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So as I'm driving, I pull into Sugarland at my sister-in-law and brother-in-law's house because Mark is very good about thinking those things through. And so when I called him, he said, "Why don't you come here and we will make some phone calls?" So I go there. I'm all by myself because my sister-in-law's not there at the moment, and he makes a phone call And he walks back in where I'm at and he said, Donnel, they just got her to the hospital. So I was feeling a little relieved, but this time people are calling me back. Her boyfriend actually called back. Everyone's wanting to know what's the latest. A lot of people think, like we all are, that this is, maybe a fender bender at the time and we still don't know anything. And I don't know if I had, Richard was in between cities at the time. He'd landed and he was at the airport. And so I'm still by myself, and Mark, my brother-in-law, calls at the hospital. And I walk toward the kitchen and I see him in his office, and, he looked very white. And I'm over here still thinking logistically how I'm going to do this. And my kid, everyone's kind of calling, wanting to know what's going on. And, he walks back in the room with me and I'm sitting on the couch, and he blankly looked at me and he goes, Donnel, she didn't make it.
Wow.
And of course, that the shock of hearing that, what? I was by myself, and just the numbness of hearing those words, of the reality of the instant that she's gone. Back to the accident, she was coming home on Highway 59 going toward Houston. And like Richard said, between Diboll and Oregon, she was in the right lane. And that road was all under construction, and they had that real thick asphalt, no center stripe and no shoulder. And so there was like a slow down area, and witnesses said she was like in the right lane, getting ready to pass the car in her left lane. And either that car swerved toward her, or she just kind of went a little bit on the left, which we all do, right? We get on that shoulder. But because there wasn't that shoulder, her tire got stuck in between the asphalt and the shoulder. And I'm sure at the time she panicked and yanked her wheel to the right to get back on the road. And by doing so, she flipped her car and flipped her car all the way on the opposite side of the traffic and hit a ditch. Traffic was pretty full and heavy, and not one person was involved in this, just her.
Wow.
Which was, these are all these little God moments that we see now that have all happened the way.
Yeah, looking back.
Yeah, so which tells me, this was very instant. There was no suffering. So back to the story, I, at this point, am hearing from people, and I believe my son, who at the time was a freshman at Travis High School, he texted me and he goes, Mom, is Tracie coming home this weekend? And I said, yes, me already knowing the information. He's like, someone just told me she was in a car wreck. So the news was traveling faster than we could even absorb.
Wow.
And the rumors were flying on things that weren't even true. But at the same time, I'm trying to sort all this in and trying to absorb this. And I think, Richard, share your story on how you heard. You had called me and I told you, correct?
Well, I was leaving from Phoenix, and so I was as usual in meetings out there to and from, and Donnel had called, and so she had, I could tell that there was a level of frustration in her voice that wasn't ordinarily there, and it was like, I really need you to call me back, or some words to that effect. And so as I was kind of going between offices out there, I could sort of just pick up that extra sense that I need to call her back, and I call her back all sort of chipper, and I could tell she's pretty frustrated about it then. So this was before she found out that what Tracie's ultimate outcome was. So I call her back and immediately have some of my colleagues take me to the airport, which in Phoenix isn't that far away from the office I was in. And so I remember pulling up into the terminal, getting through the front part of the Phoenix terminal, and then getting down to the Southwest gate to change my flight just to get on the next flight. I wasn't supposed to leave till about 4 p.m.
Yeah.
And at some point, I get in touch with Donnel just to let her know what my plans are and when my second flight may or may not be getting in. And Donnel just had this flat voice. Just best way I know is it's just a flat voice. I mean, you can tell from Donnel she's pretty expressive, but this time it was just as flat as a piece of paper, and it was going. She didn't make it, and so that caused a reaction for me that I think people at Southwest probably still talk about.
Mm.
But I got on flights, earlier flights. Southwest was magnificent. Just kind of the first of those moments where, complete strangers do extraordinary things
Yeah.
to help you come back. And so if you can imagine, I had to wait about an hour for the next flight to come in, or maybe even longer than that. So I'm sitting off by myself in the Southwest terminal area. And, I think pretty much all the passengers around there too, they start to think, they're sort of starting to stay away from me at that point. And then landing, I think about 4:00 that afternoon, to a moment where my life had changed in a blink.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Wow. Thank you so much both for sharing your stories of that moment, that experience. I know that instant when you find out, I mean, there's no real words to put to it, and I'm so sorry for your loss.
Well, I think Donnel has said it before too. She didn't really cover it here, but she'd said, when I first heard the call about the accident, I thought, okay, this is going to be kind of a pain in the neck, because Donnel at that time was planning for a meeting that she was organizing with her company. And she was going, okay, gosh, am I going to have to go up there and mess with the insurance and mess with the car, and sort of, you just don't immediately think that Tracie was hurt. You think maybe she might have broken her arm or something like that, but not anything mortal at that point. But she's thinking of all the administrative tasks that you have to do. And then all of a sudden it turns out it's a lot more severe than that.
Yeah.
Then I got to admit, I was kind of in that same spot. How am I going to do this? I've got to get a ride to the airport and all that sort of stuff. So,
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden it jumps up, and it's sort of time stands still.
Yeah.
Time stands still for you a little bit.
Yeah, we there's a lot of little one-liners that have kind of come from this, and even 17 will be 17 years this year without her. She passed away just a few months after her 18th birthday. So the realization of having her gone as many years as she lived is just a gut punch.
Yeah, for real.
But one of the things that we've always said, and I've always said, but it was so true about this story, was no matter how bad something is, it always be worse. And a lot of my friends were like, Donnel, your daughter died. And I would say, sorry.
It's okay.
You want me to carry it on?
Yeah.
You want me to take it, Donnel?
Yes.
What Donnel is commonly says, it could have been worse. She could have lived. And had she lived, it would have been an estate for her that was so contrary to the way that Tracie lived. So that's, it's one of those things that not a lot of people quite understand.
Right.
Until you do go through it.
Right. I think about that with my sister as well.
We know a little bit about your sister's case too, Rachel, from your folks being a part of GriefShare for us too. So, as much as you want somebody to live, you want them to live in sort of a productive is one word for it, but just a way that they can maximize their whole self.
Right.
Yeah. To live the life that they've lived, or to thrive. And we want them healthy and happy, and that's the way it should be. So when they're not going to be that way, that's not the way we want to see them. And by all means, they probably don't want to be in that predicament as well. So
exactly.
I am grateful that we did not have to make any decisions. God came in and took her immediately. And that burden on us was something we never had to deal with. Back up a little bit, that summer, I had a significant birthday, and Tracie turned 18. And at that point, this was before you could do things online. And she always wanted to be a donor. And so waiting at the D&B, and the line's long, and she's talking about this, going to be a donor, and you have to sign up there. And we get up there, and she forgot at that moment. Walk out, and she's, oh my gosh, I forgot. Well, I said, just go up to the window and ask. And nope, Tracie didn't want to cut in front of anyone. So we waited all the way back in the line so she could be a donor. So looking back, it's like she knew her life was going to be short. And she wanted to make sure that she could help everyone else that she could after she wasn't here.
Yeah.
We knew that she was gone pretty quick because they never could take her vital organs, the heart, the bigger organs, because she was gone. But they were able to take pretty much everything else, skin, eyes, hair, nails, eyelashes, pretty much anything.
Incredible. Yeah.
Amazing. That's another whole part of the story. That's just amazing. So,
wow. It is kind of amazing how it does seem like there's a bit of a knowing, even if maybe they don't recognize it in that moment, but when you look back, you can see those moments that are just.
Maybe so. Yeah. Maybe they did. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think Bethany was really intentional about, trips and getting time with people. And the way she lived her life those last few years, you could just tell it was sort of this intentionality when you look back. And it's just beautiful. It's hard, but it's beautiful.
Sort of a joyfulness, Rachel.
Yes.
Is that what you call it? Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm curious, what led you guys to GriefShare originally?
Funny story. Richard, you can start it off and explain how I was so enthusiastic about going.
So she died in October, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Donnel, it seemed like it was, when somebody dies suddenly like that, you've got funerals to attend to, you've got all sorts of, a lot of stuff before you can even get into your own grieving.
Just kind of have to hold it together for a little bit to get stuff done. Yeah.
So almost immediately we're into Thanksgiving and Christmas and the New Year's. So it wasn't until the following year, early 2007, if I'm remembering it right. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was the early part of the year. Both of us happened to work for extremely good companies when it came to the level of care that they gave to their employees who'd been through such an event.
Mm-hmm.
And so they both pushed us into EAPs, employee assistance programs that they had, so we could have almost limitless counseling. And we tried a couple of different counseling opportunities that were just, one of them was with an individual counselor, but that just wasn't a good fit. And then there was another group setting that we had at a church elsewhere in the Fort Bend County area. And then we just happened upon GriefShare, and we weren't going to River Point at that time, but we knew Tracie did. Tracie was in love with River Point.
Mm-hmm.
So what we did was we found out there was this group there called GriefShare. And as Donnel said, she managed to control her enthusiasm, I think is a nice way to say it, for GriefShare, because the first thing that you do is you go in there and you say, I don't sit around a bunch of people who are talking. Their grief can't be as good as mine. Mm-hmm. It can't, maybe good as mine is a poor choice of words, but mine is nobody loses an 18-year-old kid. Mm-hmm. And then we went and sat there with this wonderful leader named Betty Ann Rutherford, who was just this joyful Christian. She herself had been through loss of an infant a number of years previous.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got to sit around and listen to all these people tell their stories. And somehow, I won't say that ours felt insignificant, but we felt like we were in the right place.
Yeah.
Because there were a group of people around there who'd been through all sorts of losses. And we realized ours sort of fit within that category. And we got to the point where we sort of look forward to coming every week. But as I always tell people, it's 8.7 miles from the house to River Point Church. And for every 10th of a mile on the way over there, Donnel was turn around and go home. I hate this place. We're not going to do it. I hate going here. We're going to stop doing it. Then once she would get in there, she would be like lit up because she enjoyed it so much, because you start to look forward to the interactions you get with the other members in there, because you're members of the fraternity that nobody wants to pledge to.
Right. So true.
But it's also the fraternity that just keeps growing regardless, because as we all know, in some part of us, that 100% of us will end up dying at some point. And we were really sort of, I think we were sort of surface level Christians at that point. I was a lay reader at Episcopal Church. Donnel was sort of not a real happy member of another denomination I won't go into. And our other kids were going their own way too. But we we went to River Point. We were just attached.
Yeah.
Almost immediately.
So cool.
And so we were just taken by how warm these people were and how much their stories and our stories, while not the same, they brought up the same kinds of emotions, because at the end of the day, loss is loss.
Mm-hmm.
You have the absence of somebody's presence that's a constant in your life.
Yeah.
And so we got to the point where we really needed that. And then it was, a couple of years later, I think I went back a second time as a member for a few sessions. I mean, it's 13 to 14 weeks long.
Okay.
So I went back because I felt like I felt like I needed another dose of it. And then we got to know some of that they had a need for assistance, or, sort of a junior member of the leadership team. So I started doing that. I got Donnel involved in that then. And then within a couple of years, I think it was 2009 when we both sort of jumped into it. We went ahead and made the commitment. By that time, we were going to River Point.
Okay. Yeah.
River Point is full members. We were interviewed for one of the services that they threw up on the videos. And even though those moments really caused you to go through a whole bunch of Kleenex, they were still real meaningful to us. And, by talking about your story, it helps you to heal.
Mm. Yeah.
It also helps you sort of, I think it helps you sort of confront your faith. And sometimes it's confront the weakness of your faith.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's how I took it. Donnel, I didn't want to put any words in your mouth, but having been through it as long as you have, you go ahead, you speak for yourself.
No, I mean, addressing the obvious sometimes is the hardest, because the easiest thing to do is do nothing.
Right.
And, grief in itself is a journey that you have to go through, and there's different waves and there's different levels of it. And GriefShare is just the tools to help you identify these things that are happening or have happened. And by doing this so many years, I have a lot of really good friends that ask, why do you still do this?
Yeah.
Doesn't it, opened up your wound? And it really does. It does open it again, but every time you do it, that wound becomes more calloused.
Mm-hmm.
And getting that joy back, knowing that we're helping others, just as though Tracie did.
Yes.
And that's the beauty. I like to say, I feel letting these new grieving people see what it's like to be past the death years later.
That's so powerful for people to see that,
Yes.
There can be hope again. Yeah.
I was where you were, and I couldn't lift my head up. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I cried all day. But look at me today. Look at my family today. I have a son who's a pastor. I have a daughter who's a teacher. I have another daughter went to school for teaching. We are all thriving.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is not only the gift from Tracie, but that we feel we want to survive and thrive because of Tracie. So there's a lot of beautiful things, but when you're going through it, it's just a big fog, and it's bad. It is not. I tell people there's no magic. There's no magic pill. There's no magic of anything. It's just going through.
You got to do the work.
You have to do the work. And I'll be honest, this is 17 years, and it still punches me, and I lose my breath, and to realize we don't have her anymore. Her friends have now not only gotten married, but are having children. That constant reminder of what we should or could have had is heartbreaking. But I always say Tracie's always on my shoulder when I'm having one of these pity parties, and encourages me to be a part of those lives of her friends and family, to have her legacy live. And it's tough. It is hard to show up at places, and but I always feel a bit of relief when you face it than when you don't. And I think
Yes.
that's kind of the way it is with grief. So,
I think Tracie was, Rachel, you probably remember this. She wasn't the best dancer. She wasn't nearly as good as you or several other girls, but she just approached what Tracie liked more than anything is more than the halftime shows and the presentation. Y'all, she loved the work in the parking lot.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
She would stay out there on a blacktop parking lot at Austin High School until she almost fell over. I had to go get her from Heathcock's office one time because she'd passed out because she wouldn't take. Heathcock calls me up and says, "Hey, you need to come get Tracie." And I happened to be in town that day, and I went up and got her. But one of the things that Tracie was so much about, kind of like Nell points out, is helping other people. So I think that's what's propelled us into this GriefShare ministry is that, because every semester we're 2 weeks away from starting it back up at River Point again for the spring semester. And there's just like any repeating job, there's sort of administrative burden. You go, okay, am I doing this? Am I doing that? And it can be sort of drudgery. And then the minute that you meet that first group of people that go there, you're really pretty lit up.
Yeah.
Because you realize you're going to get to know people at their worst. So in one way, it's kind of easy for them to get better.
Yes.
Better after they're in the bottoms of it. I mean, I remember your own folks, how really tough it was for both of them to get through a session.
Mm-hmm.
But Tracie's help, I think the story that Donnel just told about the organ donation is so relevant. I was reaching the point in my career where at least I could see retirement on the horizon coming. But before that, it was a few years after Tracie's accident. I was just on some group sales calls with a couple of my reps, and just in your day-to-day stuff, you get a list from a rep. I'm going to call on these people. This is who we're talking to. And I got to admit, when I get the list, I'm used to looking at it 3 days a week and say, okay, there's the list. I'll kind of figure it out as we go.
Right.
Little did I know, but I was all of a sudden in the office of Life Gift. That was who we were having our lunch appointment with that day. And I didn't really understand it because the particular rep I had a lot of medical companies in the med center area. So this was just one of them. And then they started talking about what they do. And I'm this is 4, 5, 6 years later, maybe. Mm-hmm. And I'm sort of almost having like an out of body experience. And then when I go downstairs, I'm walking through, because people like to take us to see at FedEx, they like to take you to see their operation. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden I'm walking by the desk and I'm hearing a phone call that I had gotten.
Wow.
4 years or 6 years before, whatever it was. And it was one of those moments. And I told Donnel, you've got to come here. And it was a really, really hard on Donnel, but the Life Gift people were so wonderful. So what that's led me into doing now is to be able to tell this story to the Life Gift, sort of their customer service reps, but they're the ones who call on the Donnel and Richards for their moments when their loved ones have passed away.
In that moment, that deep moment of grief. Yeah.
Yeah. And Tracie, Donnel left out a little bit out of the story, because now in order to be an organ donor, you just check a box when you're doing a sign in to get your driver's license.
Right. It's pretty simple these days.
Yeah. But automation wasn't where it is now. And so back then you had to really go through a lot, there were a couple of different functions you did, and Tracie had forgotten about. And so she forced her way up to the front to make sure that she was on that list. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you remember, but that summer at Austin High School, a couple of kids had died. Mm. And Tracie told us we used to have monthly family meetings to know. We would have the kid of the month and all that sort of stuff. And it was just silly stuff. And Donnel would get a Blockbuster cards back when Blockbuster cards
were Blockbuster.
Right, Blockbuster or Games People Play or something like that. So Donnel was the one that approached the question. She had asked the kids, she said, you've had two 18-year-old kids have died. We wouldn't know what to do if something like that were to happen to you. And so Tracie went on to, in her usually very funny Tracie way, I tell you what I do. What I want to do, Mom and Richard, is I want to be cremated, and I want to be spread over the Austin High School parking lot and First Colony Mall. Right, Donnel?
Yeah.
And First Colony Mall, and I want my organs to be donated.
Wow.
And that was that gifting part of Tracie. So now that's one thing with life gifts is you can see it as a burden or you can see it as a joy.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
think both Donnell and I have looked upon these as pleasures, and we get to do this. We don't have to do this. We get to. Because every one of those people that are in one of those classes, Rachel, we look at and we can go, that was us.
Mm-hmm.
That was us,
Wow.
Now 16, 17 years ago.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's where you get a chance to give back.
Yes. And that speaks so much, I think, to the power of community, when we're processing grief. And I remember with, the memorial service for Bethany, I was thinking actually to the memorial service for Tracie as well. The balloon release that you guys did was so beautiful. And then the idea of the butterfly, symbol that kind of came to be part of what we did on Angels. And I felt that even with Bethany, like when I see butterflies, I think of her. And anyway, those were special moments. And then thinking about, we were in the midst of the pandemic when Bethany passed, but just the power of seeing people's faces. And then when someone would give me a hug, even though we were kind of like, do we give hugs yet? But
distance.
But we needed it, just that sense of you're not alone. There's someone with you, the power of that. And so anything you guys want to add to just the power of community?
Yeah. And, back up to the story of the day of the accident, I believe we were just swamped with people. And maybe it was the next day, still people coming. We're planning this celebration. We had slideshows. We had bracelets being made. It was basically a well-oiled machine. We were planning this celebration of Tracie. We had a week to do this. And Betsy, Miss Heathcock, the dance director, as you know, came. And I remember her kneeling down next to me on the couch, and she said, I want to do something. We're going to do a walk. Let's do a memory of Tracie. Let's figure this out. And very quickly, she came up with the idea that we would do a walk once a year around her angelversary, is what we call it. Aww. When you pass away.
Yeah.
And we were going to do a memory walk, raise money, and we're going to do it around Austin High School, around the parking lot. And we're going to have the band there because Tracie loved the band in the parking lot.
Yeah.
And we're going to raise money, and we're going to donate those monies earned to a scholarship in honor of Tracie. And it was, the thought of that was, what a thought, what an idea. I don't know how this will happen. I don't know what, but it happened. And to what we said earlier, it was good 10, 12 years.
That's incredible.
And so it's the community again, right? It was the idea and making it happen, and the stories and the lessons learned. Every one of these, we wound up in the gym at the high school where we had speakers. We had Tracie's friends sing. It was an honor for her story, but we realized we were helping others as well. People would come up to us maybe at the grocery store, and a parent would tell us the story of their own child and how they got home after Tracie's balloon release and made a difference and decided to change some bad behaviors they were doing.
Wow.
So we didn't even realize the lives that were changing because of Tracie.
Yeah.
So we'll never really know. Yeah. And that's the beauty of gifts, is they go on forever. And that's, I think, why we continue to do what we do, is because we know it's helping others even without it being seen.
So good.
Yeah, and the community that I think Tracie represented and that we really sort of attached to. Well, first, there were 2 points I want to make. First of all, Tracie, had she not passed away, as Donnell said, there's not a day that goes by that both of us don't miss her, or we don't think of something silly or goofy or funny or inspiring or something that Tracie would have done at the moment. But when you look at that, happened in 2006, we're in early 2023 now, is that, she would have likely gone on, got married, had kids. She was one of your peers, Rachel. So the stage of life that you're at,
right?
And probably been successful at her job, would have been a good mom, been a great wife, been a credit to her community. But what her impact has been since that accident has been a lot bigger than that.
Yeah.
And we hate it that she's not still around with us. But you have to suddenly, it's just that not funny way that God works, but it's that way that God works that we don't have the depth to understand.
Yeah. So
Is that
true.
God has taken her and basically sprayed her out all over in a whole lot of directions that she would not have been sprayed.
Mm-hmm.
She was not have been sprayed otherwise.
Right.
One thing, there was one point I want to go back on Tracie was that Donnel mentioned we had the youngest daughter is a teacher. Our the middle son, Nick, is a pastor in Lubbock, married to a pastor in Lubbock.
Mm-hmm.
And our older daughter adopted a special needs child who was essentially abandoned
Wow.
or was going to be abandoned and taken on an enormous amount of work. She didn't have to. She and her husband didn't have children of their own necessarily, but they've adopted these two kids. And then the youngest son, they adopted him out of a very difficult situation,
Wow.
difficult family situation. So, I mean, all of them, all three of those kids have done just things they didn't really have to. And I think Tracie is nudging them,
Mm-hmm.
is always nudged them in that direction. So,
Yeah. I love that. That's so
yeah.
beautiful. Just thinking about everything that you've experienced personally, and then also seeing people that you've walked through grief with through GriefShare, maybe any thoughts on healthy versus unhealthy ways to process our grief?
Yeah, I mean, we all have choices.
Mm-hmm.
We can. It's not going away, and like I said earlier, if you don't acknowledge it, doesn't mean it didn't happen. And
Yeah.
in the beginning, for me, it was very difficult because I could not see past anything because I was such in a fog and in distraught, and it takes time. And there's another saying of that we use a lot, and everyone says, time will tell, give it time. And we all know that in anything, but we always say it's what you do with the time that helps you heal. And so
Yes.
the counseling and the grief share, those are all part of the journey of grief. It never ends.
Mm-hmm.
It never ends. We're in the 17th year. It'll never go away. It'll always be with us. But if we look at it differently,
Right.
we celebrate her. We still include her in our prayers and wishes and dreams, but she's just not physically here with us.
Mm-hmm.
It's just ongoing, but we've survived, and it's partly because we know that's what Tracie would have wanted us to do.
So good.
I think that the healthy way is to involve people with you.
Mm-hmm.
It basically ties back to the community question you asked about, Rachel,
Yes.
is because people will always look at the shadow you cast. Donnell's heard me use that phrase a lot. And if they see you going around sullen and morose, if they see you, I think there's a healthy period of grieving, and it can be anywhere from a short amount of time to quite some time. But at some point, you have to be seen as getting better. But I think the difficulty that people have, I think sometimes the unhealthy part is they just stop talking about Tracie, or they
Mm-hmm.
stop talking about your sister.
Yeah.
They stop, and then people go, and people don't know how to approach you because you become radioactive.
Mm-hmm.
You become absolutely toxic. And one of the books I read was about a former University of Texas football player who died in a one car car accident, actually not very far away from where Tracie did. And his father later wrote a book. They just had this wonderful father and son relationship. Football player's name was Cole Pittman. And he said, I want people to talk about Cole Pittman for every day of the rest of my life, because by talking about him, that's how you keep him alive.
Mm-hmm.
And I never want Cole Pittman to die. As long as people talk about him, he remains alive.
Yeah.
And I think that's important too, is to let other people around you know that it's okay to talk about it. Some people will find this difficult, but I think you have to dive into your faith too.
Yeah.
And you can't stick your toe into the shallow end of the water and say, well, I'll kind of get around to it. Because prior to Tracie's deal, I mean, I was a lay reader at church, and I've gone to church pretty faithfully, almost all my life, but my faith was about 14 miles long and about 1/8 of an inch deep.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what sort of pushed me into it. So in some ways, Tracie's helped reintroduce me to God.
Wow. Yes.
And if I didn't have that, where would I be now? Well, my faith would probably be 15 miles wide and 1/16th of an inch deep, because
Right.
I wouldn't have examined it. But I think that's the one thing. That's one of the things too. I think the unhealthy things are things like avoiding any conversation at all, continuing to keep. This is something that comes straight from the GriefShare material. Setting a place at a table 5 years, 6 years later for your deceased loved one.
Mm-hmm.
Tracie would have wanted us to go on. I think that's one of those things that Donnel has said repeatedly is, if the shoe were on the other foot, what would Tracie be doing in one of our memories?
Yeah.
Your sister sounds much the same.
Mm-hmm.
She wouldn't have wanted you guys to be all down in the mouth about it and crying every time you bring the name up. It's important to keep the great part of that person alive.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it too is the very thing that you are grieving the most is a thing that God gave you to begin with. In our case, that's the 18 years of Tracie's life.
Yeah. What a gift. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the real gift. And if you don't talk about her, then it's almost like that part gets wiped out.
Mm.
And here's a couple notes that I had written down that I was just looking through, and a statement that I always think about, and then if it's okay, I'll read a poem that I have.
Oh, I'd love that. Yes, that would be great.
So, what's worse, absence of her presence or presence of her absence? Here's the poem by Elizabeth Amons. It goes, "You can shed tears because they are gone, or you can smile because they lived. You can close your eyes and pray they will come back, or you can open your eyes and see all that they left for you. Your heart can be empty because you can't see them, or you can be full of the love you shared. You can turn your back on tomorrow and live yesterday, or you can be happy for tomorrow because of yesterday. You can remember only that they are gone, or you can cherish their memory and let it live on. You can cry and close your mind and feel empty, or you can do what they would want. Smile, open your heart, love, and go on." Isn't that beautiful?
That is
That's great.
so beautiful. Yes, thank you for reading that. I think that really encapsulates so much of that message of, how are we
Absolutely.
honoring their lives by the way we
Yes.
continue forward. And
Yes.
Rachel, I think one of the questions I have is how you remembering your sister.
yes, that's a great
Some
question.
of the same questions you've asked us.
Yeah.
Or I was wanting to find out from you about your own journey.
Yes, that's such a good question. It's definitely, again, been a journey. Like you guys said, there's kind of some times where you have a wave of that grief. I know when I passed by the hospital where she passed, that's challenging. It's gotten easier, but I think that has been a hard moment. But as far as kind of remembering her and honoring her, there's been kind of multiple small ways. There's things that I know that she loved and enjoyed. And so, something we used to get together for kind of like sister dates. I would go pick her up and we'd maybe grab lunch, get our nails done, that kind of thing once in a while. And so I do that sometimes just in memory of her. And then we went to Colorado. My parents went the first summer after she died. They went to Colorado and had some time remembering her because that was one of her favorite places. And then this past summer, we went back for a week, and her husband hiked all the way up Mount Red Cloud with her ashes.
Oh,
and
wow.
Released her ashes at the top of Mount Red Cloud, which was, she had said, either on Mount Red Cloud or in Galveston. So he honored her in that way. And that was just a really beautiful week, hard, but really beautiful. And just looking around at just the majesty of God's creation, it was really healing as well. And you could just, like you said, you kind of sense they're with you and their spirit with you. And I also recently, I wrote a book and I started a small business.
Oh, wow.
And I named the business after her nickname. which was Bright Eyes. So similar to Tracie, just so much life and
neat.
joy. And so her college nickname that her friends gave her was Bright Eyes. And it's so true. I mean, you look at pictures of her and you just see that. And so I named it Bright Eyes Unlimited. So just a memory of her, and excited to find ways as I move through life to remember her, honor her, and trying to think. There's probably been some other ways, but those are the ones that come to mind. So
That's awesome.
I just remember one thing I did too. I say I'm terrified of heights, and I've done some really stupid stuff off, bungee jumping and all sorts of stuff. And Tracie always wanted to go skydiving, and she had planned to go during the summer prior to her accident. And then she didn't do it. So Nick had sort of conned me into taking him skydiving if he didn't get in trouble in high school. So right before he goes off to college to Sam, I think I've gotten away with it because Donnell told me, she said, you promised him, so you got to do it. So it's like a week before he leaves for Sam, he springs it on me. He said, well, I've checked out the skydiving place in Rogers. Oh, crud. So one of the things I did to sort of calm myself down too, because my dad was a bomber pilot who used to drop parachuters.
Oh, wow.
During World War II, mostly in drills, but he just said there was no good reason to jump out of a perfectly good aircraft for anybody who's sane. So I went, and it helped me to sort of focus because I'd taken some of Tracie's ashes with me. And I was able to, when you said that about what y'all did with her ashes, I said, okay, that's what I've got to do too. So there's a video somewhere of me with the guy over one shoulder, my tandem jumper, telling me how to do it. Nick is in another part of the plane, and he still says, I'm praying to the guy.
Yeah.
Trying to talk him into letting me go down without jumping. So.
Yeah. That's great.
But that was something. So somewhere I think Tracie got a good deal of joy out of floating down from 11,000 feet. So.
Exactly. Yeah. Some of those things, she was kind of the courageous big sister who would help me go in the deep end of the pool, that kind of thing. So, doing some of those things that I maybe wouldn't naturally want to do. But yes, taking a bit of a step of courage in her honor. So,
or that seem pretty crazy.
Right? Yes, exactly.
That's what you really want to say.
Yes, for sure. Well, this has been so good. Is there anything else you guys want to share? Maybe Richard, if you want to share kind of how people could get connected into GriefShare groups. And I know there's multiple that meet. So
it's griefshare.org, and you put in your zip code and it will find the closest space for you. There's a lot of free resources that are online. And then once you sign up you can actually order the materials that you need from the online portal. You can see the times of day, days of the week that they're being offered. But there are probably thousands of really good grief resources that are there online. GriefShare is probably the most well-known of the grief resources, as I understand it from people at the church. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of good places out there. Not every church offers it, but some offers GriefShare, but almost every church is going to offer some sort of counseling, sometimes with a pastor or sometimes a member of the staff. But I would just say, if you don't have a comfort level with a counselor at your church or a church that you go to, keep looking. Because Donnell and I went through two of them at first before we found GriefShare because they weren't suited for us. But one of them had about 15 or 20 people in there. So obviously it fit those people too. Mm-hmm. So keep looking and keep reaching out to the community.
That's so good.
It's like the part of the Bible where it said, love your neighbor as yourself. And the second of the great commandments in the Bible. And the individual had asked Jesus, who's my neighbor? And Jesus' answer was basically everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
That's who your neighbor is.
So
just remember, you've got a lot of neighbors out there who've been through this, and reach out to them or reach out to somebody or something to get some assistance.
Yes, thank you for that. And any final thoughts that you want to share, Donnell?
We just don't know what life is offering and what will happen. And we always say in a blink of an eye, and we live that. We live that nightmare of really not knowing what will happen. But we also have survived, and we're thriving. Life is never easy, but make the best of it. See the positives, and we live on for those that can't live. And life's short. We know the eternity will be forever with those loved ones, but while we're here on earth, we're going to do the best we can to make them proud and to be active members of society. So I just, I thank people like yourself and like Richard, and for anyone who volunteers and is dedicated to helping others. We always need more people like that, and we just thrive to survive. And so I thank you, Rachel, for getting us together, and always Richard for your dedication to our Tracie.
Yes.
I think, Rachel, the last time I saw you was on stage at Austin High School when you won the scholarship. So this is amazing to see however many years that is later.
Yes, I know. That was probably 2008. So
yeah, that must have been. Yeah.
Rach, I don't know if you know this, but many moons ago, I graduated from Dulles High School.
Did you?
Yeah. Talk about how everything comes together.
Yes.
Somehow or other. Yeah.
So cool.
Where one of your teachers was Betsy Heathcock, right?
Well, we weren't going to talk about that.
Yeah, Betsy probably doesn't want you.
That.
She doesn't want you to talk about it either, does she?
So cool. Oh, well, that's super fun. And this has been such a special thing for me to get to reconnect with both of you and just to be able to celebrate our loved ones and just talk through this grief process, because it is, I think, so much better when we go through it together. And thank you both for honoring Tracie, continuing to honor her, and for just the impact that you've made in my life as well. So special to kind of have this full circle moment with you guys as well. So
very true.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much again for being willing to share your story and come on the podcast.
Oh, anytime.
I'm so thankful for Richard and Donnel and their willingness to open up about a really difficult topic. I love how this conversation today was really a picture of community and action, and how walking through this together can help bring healing and hope. You can find all the links, the full show notes, and additional resources on our website, creativeimpactpodcast.com. If you haven't already, I invite you to subscribe to the show wherever you happen to be listening. And if you're interested in supporting the show on a monthly basis, you can check out our Patreon community at creativeimpactpodcast.com. Thank you so much for listening to the Creative Impact Podcast. The music for the show was produced by Michael Cash. Until next time, remember that you were designed to create. You were made to inspire. Continue living with purpose and making an impact. I'll see you next time, friends.